You don't spend 12 years in search and rescue and come out believing in monsters. You come out believing in statistics. You learn the odds of a day hiker, making it out before hypothermia kicks in. You learn how fast a healthy adult can travel on a 10% grade with a 40-pound pack. You learn what a cougar kill looks like, what a bear mauling looks like, what an avalanche does to a body. You learn patterns. That's why the disappearances in Clearwater Range never sat right with me. The numbers weren't the problem. It was the way the numbers were wrong. My name is Daniel Hart. I work backcountry SAR in Washington State, mostly attached to Clearwater National Park, for longer than was good for me. I've pulled bodies out of ravines, carried broken kids to medevac helicopters, and told parents that their son or daughter died clean, fast, and without pain, even when I knew it was a lie they needed more than the truth. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here because 3 months ago I walked away from the job with a resignation letter that will never see daylight, an NDA I will never honor, and a folder of evidence that says the thing people call Bigfoot exists. And it's not the scariest thing in those woods. The first file. If you want to understand how this started, you have to go back to a Tuesday in late September, 3 years ago. The kind of day tourists think of when they picture the Pacific Northwest. Slate sky, light drizzle, air thick with wet pine and cold river. I was in the SAR office, a cramped prefab behind the ranger station, doing what every field tech hates most: paperwork, incident forms, gear inventory, yet another online course about visitor engagement best practices. My radio sat on the desk, crackling with the usual background noise. Maintenance guys complaining about trail erosion, a ranger warning about a black bear near the campground dumpsters. Then the tone dropped. 3 sharp beeps. The channel went quiet. Unit 7 dispatch. A woman's voice said, "Tight professional. Copy possible code yellow, over." I sat up, grabbed the handset. "Dispatch, this is 7, go ahead." Caller reports overdue hiker. Solo male, 32, last seen yesterday morning heading up Iron Neck Trail. ETA return was 1700 yesterday. No contact since. Cell straight to voicemail. I swiveled my chair toward the corkboard on the wall. Iron Neck Trail was marked there in red string and thumbtacks, a jagged line cutting through heavy contour lines. Long, steep, rarely maintained. The kind of trail people did to prove something to themselves. Affirm, dispatch. You got a plate, name, vehicle description. Affirm. Subject is Kyle Barnes, out of Portland. Vehicle is a blue Subaru Outback, Oregon plates. She rattled off a number. Parked at Iron Neck Trailhead. Another missing solo hiker. Nothing unusual. That's the problem with all of this. None of it looks unusual up close. 10-4, I said. I'm on it. Page volunteers and notify Ranger Command. Starting with hasty search. Copy, 7. Timeout, 10:13. I grabbed my pack, my GPS, and my range shell. On the way out, I passed Ranger Supervisor Reyes in the hallway. Late 30s, ex-Army. The kind of guy who carried stress like a second spine. Another one? He asked. Solo day hiker. Iron Neck. He grimaced. Weather's moving in this afternoon. Take Morales with you. I'll get base set up. Morales met me at the SAR truck. Short, broad, always smiling right up until things got serious. We loaded the usual kit. Trauma bag, litter, ropes, spare radio batteries, extra water. I checked my sidearm out of habit, then locked it back in the office locker. Standard policy. We weren't law enforcement. We were the people who showed up when law enforcement had already failed. On the drive out to Iron Neck, the trees blurred into a dark tunnel, branches knitting overhead. It had been raining enough that the asphalt sheen looked almost oily. You hear the rumor? Morales asked, eyes on the road. Which one? There were always rumors. Barnes's girlfriend told dispatch he texted her a photo yesterday afternoon. Said something was watching him from the tree line. I snorted. What, like a bear? Didn't say. Dispatch tried to pull the pic, never went through. Spotty reception out there. I filed it away. People say weird things when they're tired, dehydrated, high, or trying to impress someone. Watching me. Could be anything from a squirrel to a shadow. Still, It planted something small and cold in my gut. Iron Neck Trail. We found the Subaru at the trailhead where it was supposed to be. A thin layer of wet needles had collected on the windshield, and there was condensation inside the windows. No sign anyone had been in or out overnight. Vehicle confirms, I said into the radio. Starting trail hasty. We signed into the log box, checked the last entry, K. Barnes 0900 yesterday. Iron Neck Summit. Then started up the trail. Iron Neck gains elevation fast. Switchbacking through dense second-growth fir. The trail was slick, with pools of standing water. You learn to read ground sign out here. Boot prints, heel drag, disturbed moss. We picked up Barnes's tracks within the first 100 yards. Single set, men's size 11-ish, decent tread, slightly outward toe on the left foot. Textbook. At first, everything felt normal. I called out every few minutes. Kyle, search and rescue. My voice dissolved into the rain and trees. No response but the drip of water and the distant rush of the river. Around mile 4, the trail narrowed and eroded. The track stopped making sense. I was out front, GPS in one hand, eyes on the ground. Barnes's tracks were clear where the mud was deep. Left, right, left, more heel pressure on the steeper ascent. Then, 10 yards ahead, the trail rounded a sharp bend around a boulder and nothing. No slide marks. No scramble off to the side. No scuff against a stump where someone stepped off to pee. Just nothing. Undisturbed mud and leaf litter, as if no one had walked there in a week. I crouched, frowning, scanning the slope below. It dropped off steeply into thick underbrush and down logs. If he'd slipped and tumbled, we'd see it. Broken ferns, disturbed soil, a handprint. Morales. I called, "You seeing this?" He came up beside me, breathing hard. Tracks end. Yeah, you see where he stepped off. We spent 10 minutes carefully checking the area. Nothing downhill, nothing uphill, no broken branches, no displacement of ground cover. He didn't just vanish, Morales muttered. Maybe he put on different shoes. I knew how dumb that sounded, but I had to say something. In the middle of the trail? And what flew away? I thumbed my radio. Base from 7. Go ahead, 7. Reyes answered. We've got subjects tracks from trailhead to mile 4. They terminate abruptly at marker 4.1. No sign of egress from trail at this time. Request permission to grid search radius 200 meters. Reyes was silent for a moment. I pictured him standing over the topo map at base, hand on his chin. Permission granted, he said. We're sending 2 more ground teams to leapfrog ahead and check summit and the spur trail. Weather moving and faster than forecast. Be mindful of footing. Copy. We spent the next 3 hours tearing that hillside apart. We dropped down the slope, climbing over slick moss logs, pushing through sword ferns up to our chests. I slipped twice, grinding my knee into wet dirt. We searched every drainage, checked every possible fall line. We found nothing. No backpack, no water bottle, no torn clothing, no sign of an animal encounter, no drag marks, no blood, no tufts of hair. When the storm rolled in, the temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many minutes. Fog clotted between the trees. Rain came in sideways, needling our faces. 7, all units. Reyes said over the radio, voice slightly distorted by static. Lightning in your area. Suspended search for the day. All teams return to trailhead. We'll regroup at 0600 tomorrow. We hiked out in silence, our headlamps cutting narrow cones through the rain as dusk settled in. At one point, I stopped and glanced back up the trail, a prickling sensation crawling up my neck. It felt like someone was standing just beyond the edge of the light, watching. But when I held my beam there was nothing but trees and fog. Hundreds, not one. If it had just been Kyle Barnes, I would have chalked it up to bad terrain and worse luck. People vanish in the woods all the time, especially when they ignore trail markers, hike solo, or push past their limits. But it wasn't just Barnes. After we called a search on day 3, listed him as missing, presumed dead, I went back to the office and pulled a pot of coffee that tasted like burnt rubber and old socks. I couldn't shake the feeling we'd missed something obvious. On a whim, I logged into the old incident report database. It was clunky, half the links broken, the search function about 10 years behind modern software. But the data was there if you knew how to ask. I ran a query. Clearwater MP missing, not recovered, overdue hikers, and set the date range of the last 15 years. The list populated slowly. Names, ages, last known locations. Most parts of a handful of cold cases stretching back decades. People who wandered off, drowned, or decided to disappear on purpose. We had 37. 37 missing hikers, backpackers, and climbers in 15 years who were never found, not even remains. That alone was bad. But when I filtered by last known location and trail segment, my stomach flipped. 19 of them had last been seen on trails that intersected a 30-square-mile patch of backcountry centered around Iron Neck Ridge. We called that area the Triangle after that, not in front of visitors. Of course. Officially, it was just Unit C7. But among SAR, among rangers, we all called it the Triangle. And a lot of people didn't like talking about the Triangle at all. I printed the list, highlighted the 19 names, and walked it into Reyes's office. He barely glanced at it before shaking his head. "You're off the clock, Hart. Go home. You're seeing this, right?" I pressed the paper closer. 19 cold cases clustered around the same region. That's not normal. We've got cliffs, slot canyons, old mine shafts, rivers that turn into meat grinders after heavy rain. It's tragic, but it's explainable. The forest keeps what it wants. This isn't just a forest. Some of these people disappeared on easy sections of well-marked trail. No storms, no blowouts, no rockfall on record. How do 19 people just vanish without leaving so much as a bootlace? Reyes pinned me with a look I'd seen him use on angry tourists and drunk campers. The one that said this conversation is over. Drop it, Hart. You know the directive. SAR handles the search, not the stats. The statisticians at Region handle macro patterns. If there's something to be concerned about, they'll let us know. And have they? His jaw worked for a moment. Get some sleep? Be back at 0700. That was the first time I realized there were things Reyes knew and was actively choosing not to share. Stories you're not supposed to listen to. There's an unofficial rule in this kind of work. Don't feed the myths. You don't repeat the story about the cougar that stalked a ranger back to his truck. You don't talk about the ghost light seen floating over Kettle Creek. You definitely don't entertain visitors who asked about that Bigfoot sighting from the 70s. You keep it clean, you keep it rational. People panic in the woods. Panic people make bad decisions. But myths have a way of growing in the spaces official stories refuse to fill. A week after Barnes' case was suspended, I was in the gear shed, coiling ropes and checking harnesses when old man McCready shuffled in. He'd been a seasonal trail tech since before I was born, long gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, beard stained yellow from tobacco. "You're the one who was up Iron Neck last week," he said, not a question. "Yeah." He spat into a Starbucks cup he used as a spit can. "Here you didn't find much." "We found nothing," I said, which in some ways is worse. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even though we were alone. "You look in the right place?" I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? McCready glanced at the open door, then back at me. "You ever hear what knocks out there, Hart?" I laughed to spite myself. "You mean like Bigfoot with knocks?" "You can call it what you want. I call it something banging on trees where there ain't anybody holding a bat." I'd heard the stories. Loggers talking about 3 sharp knocks echoing through the forest. Spaced just so. Hunters swearing something through rocks at them from the darkness just beyond their campfire. People said it was Bigfoot's way of talking, or warning, or hunting, depending on who you asked and how many beers they'd had. "I've heard noises," I said carefully. "Trees creak, branches fall." McCready shook his head. "No, son, these ain't random. These are patterned, intentional. First time I heard was back in '92 on a survey crew up near Highline Ridge. 2 knocks downhill, 1 uphill. Then a rock landed 10 feet from us, rolled right into camp. No slope above us to speak of. No wind, just that rock. You see anyone? No. And we looked. Whole crew dogged it for an hour. Boss told us to knock it off. Said it was kids. Kids, 10 miles from the nearest road, in a rainstorm. I continued looping the rope, keeping my expression neutral. Why are you telling me this, Mac? Because the triangle wasn't always called that. His voice dropped to a whisper. Old-timers used to call it Walker Country. Walker. I repeated, yeah, for the big fella that walks without making a sound. The one you never quite see, but you feel in your teeth. I paused, rope hanging limp in my hands. You're talking about Bigfoot. He spat again, eyes flat. I'm talking about something in those woods that doesn't want people there. Maybe it's an ape. Maybe it's a spirit. Maybe it's something nobody's got a name for yet. But I know this much. When you hear those knocks, you turn around and you go the other way. Mac, come on. If you had evidence. He jabbed a finger at me. I got scars on my head from things I can't unhear. That's enough evidence for me. I wanted to argue, to tell him there's always a rational explanation. But then I remembered the way Barnes's tracks had stopped mid-trail, the way the forest had felt unnaturally still as we'd searched. Reyes, know you're telling people this? I asked. McCready snorted. Reyes don't want to know. None of them up top want to know. They don't like problems they can't write a policy about. He turned to go, then stopped in the doorway. You get called into Walker Country again. You pay attention. If the forest gets quiet all at once, if you feel like your own shadow ain't yours anymore, if something starts throwing rocks, you get out, even if it means leaving some poor bastard behind. That's not how this works. I said, sharper than I meant to. We don't leave people. McCready looked at me for a long moment, something like pity in his eyes. Yeah, he said softly, that's what I used to say. Then he walked out into the rain. The second vanishing. 3 weeks later, the second case dropped. Family of 6 from Spokane. 2 parents for kids. They were camping at Clearwater Lake and decided to do a day hike up to a waterfall overlook on the edge of, you guessed it, the triangle. They left at 9 in the morning. By noon, a storm had rolled in hard and fast. Park radio picked up frantic chatter from other visitors about thunder, hail, and downed branches on the trail. At 4 p.m., a soaked, shivering 9-year-old boy stumbled into the ranger station lobby alone. His name was Connor. His lips were blue, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The front desk ranger wrapped him in a blanket, shoved a mug of hot chocolate into his hands, and called us. I arrived as Reyes was crouched in front of the kid, voice low and gentle. "Where are your parents, bud?" he asked. Connor's eyes were huge, pupils blown. Gone. Gone how? Reyes pressed. They told us to run. That got my attention. I stepped closer. Run from what, Connor? He flinched at my voice. I dialed it back. Hey, my name's Daniel. I'm with Search and Rescue. Our whole job is finding lost people and bringing them home. So I need you to tell me what happened, okay? He swallowed, glancing between me and Reyes. Rain drummed on the windows. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed. We were on the trail, he said. The one with the sign about staying on the path. It started raining really hard, and Dad said we should turn around. Then he trailed off, staring at the wall like he was watching a movie projected there. Then what? I asked. Something started knocking. He mimed with his fist. 3 solid blows. Like that, but louder. Reyes's eyes flicked to mine. McCready's words echoed in my head. In the trees? I asked. Connor nodded. On both sides, like it was talking to itself. Mom said it was just branches. But then rocks started flying. His breathing hitched. I saw the early signs of panic spiral. Rapid breaths, unfocused gaze. It's okay, I said quickly. You're safe now. Take a deep breath for me, okay? In, count to 4. Out, count to 4. Like this. We breathed with him. Slowly, he steadied. Good, I said. You said rocks. Did any of them hit anyone? He shook his head. They were landing all around us. My little sister screamed. Then Dad shouted that we all needed to run back the way we came. He grabbed my older brother. Mom picked up my sister. I was in the back. He squeezed his eyes shut. I tripped, he whispered. I fell in the mud. When I got up, they were gone. How far away were they? Reyes asked, Did you hear them yelling? Connor shook his head again, slower this time. It got really quiet. Like when you put your head under bath water. I yelled, but it sounded wrong, like the trees ate the sound. I felt the hairs on my arms lift. How did you find your way back? I asked. He shrugged helplessly. I just walked. I was crying. I thought I heard someone walking behind me. But when I turned around, there was nothing. Then I saw the parking lot. Reyes stood, pulling me aside. We got a missing family of 5, he said, voice flat. Trails on the edge of C7. Weather's easing up, but there's still lightning in the area. Take 2 and 3. Get eyes on that trail. I'll coordinate more teams as they free up. What about what he said? I asked, keeping my voice low. The knocks. The rocks. Reyes' jaw flexed. We treat it like human interference. Could be some psycho messing with hikers. Could be kids. Could be nothing. Doesn't matter. Protocol's the same. Get out there and bring them back. And if it's not human? I pushed. He shot me a look. You want to sit this one out hard? That hit like a slap. No. Good. Then gear up. Walker country. We reached the waterfall trailhead in under 30 minutes. The storm had moved east, leaving behind shredded clouds and a damp, muffled quiet. The kind of quiet that swallowed your footsteps. Team 2 and Team 3, both volunteers, met us there. I gave a quick briefing. Subject group is 5, 2 adults, 3 minors. I said, last seen on trail roughly 3 hours ago. 1 minor self-rescued. State's family told him to run. Reported hearing knocks and having rocks thrown at group. Treat as potential human interference. Maintain radio contact every 10. No one goes off trail alone. Copy. They chorus assent. As we moved up the trail, I scanned the ground the way I'd done on Iron Neck. This time there was sign everywhere, multiple boot prints. Scuffs where someone had slipped, the faint outline of a child's shoe. Half a mile in, we found the first rock. It sat in the middle of the trail, an irregular, jagged stone about the size of a grapefruit. The nearest slope it could have rolled from was too far and too low. No obvious impact mark. Morales tapped it with his boot. That wasn't here last week. You sure? I asked. I cleared a blowdown right here on Wednesday. Trail was clean. I picked up the rock. It was damp but not muddy, edges sharp. I set it aside. We found 3 more over the next quarter mile, all roughly the same size, all placed as if someone had set them there, not rolled or thrown from anywhere obvious. I don't spook easily. I've been in wideouts on exposed ridges, been a low guy on a rope team during a cliff recovery, stared at a body, so mauled we had to use dental records. But that trail felt wrong. The forest was too quiet. No chickadees, no distant woodpecker taps, no rustle of small mammals in the underbrush. Just the rhythmic crunch of our boots and the occasional crackle of the radio. 1, this is 2. My radio hissed. We've got more rocks ahead. They're lined up on a log like somebody set them there. Copy, 2, I said. Photograph and mark with tape. Do not disturb. I'd said that for the record. Truth was, every instinct was screaming for us to disturb them, scatter them, break whatever pattern was being built. But I didn't understand the rules of this game yet. And that's what it felt like, a game where we were already several moves behind. We found the family's trail about a mile from the overlook. A torn candy wrapper, a child's knit glove soaked through with rain. The boot prints showed a sudden burst of speed. Deeper heel strikes, longer strides. Here's where they started running. Morales murmured. I moved ahead, scanning the ground, the trees, the underbrush. A dark shape to my right made my heart jump, but it was just a burned stump. At 1.7 miles in, we hit the spot where everything went sideways. Jesus, someone behind me muttered. The trail opened into a small clearing, ringed with fir and cedar. The waterfall overlook lay another quarter mile ahead, but the sound of rushing water here was faint, like it had been turned down. Scattered across the ground were the family's gear and clothing. A woman's jacket lay neatly folded on a rock. A man's ball cap sat upside down next to it, as if placed. 2 small backpacks leaned against a tree. A single hiking boot stood upright in the center of the trail, laces neatly tied. There were no signs of struggle, no drag marks, no blood, just absence. I forced myself to move methodically, narrating for body cam on my chest. Subject group's gear located at approximately 47.XXX-123.XXX. I said. Items appear to have been removed and placed, not dropped. No immediate sign of subjects. I knelt by the boot. It was bone dry inside, despite the rain earlier. The insole was still warm. Morales, I asked softly, you ever see anything like this? He shook his head, eyes scanning the tree lean. Nope. Closest I've seen is hypothermic stripping, but that happens in deep cold, not 55 degrees in the rain. And they don't fold their jackets like they're doing laundry. I pointed to the disturbed earth just off the trail. Tracks. We followed them into the trees. For about 10 feet, there were clear prints. Adult male, adult female, smaller child. Then, just like with Barnes on Iron Neck, the tracks simply stopped. Not faded. Not washed out. Stopped. I felt presence then. There's no other word for it. It was like standing in front of a live electrical panel. Hair rising, skin buzzing. My peripheral vision seemed to blur, as if the trees were leaning in. Behind us, Team 2's lead crackled over the radio. 1, this is 2. You hearing something? Negative. I lied. My own radio had started to hiss with a low, irregular static that didn't match standard interference. Then we heard it. Knock. Knock, knock. 3 sharp blows, spaced with deliberate rhythm. They echoed through the trees, impossible to locate precisely. The sound felt too big for the size of the wood around us, like someone was hitting a redwood with a baseball bat. Everyone froze. Could be another team, one of the volunteers whispered. Negative, I said automatically. No one knocks like that on a search. The knocks came again, this time from a different direction. 2 short, 1 long. Morales swallowed audibly. You remember what Max said? I did, and I wish like hell that I didn't. Stay on task. I said, voice steady than I felt. Eyes open. No one separates. We. Something whistled through the air and slammed into the tree trunk to my left hard enough to send bark flying. I jerked back. It was a rock, bigger than a fist. It dropped to the ground at my feet, bounced once, and settled. The angle it had hit from made no sense. There was no higher slope there. Just more trees. 2, 3, this is 1. I snapped into the radio. We're experiencing rockfall of unknown origin. All units group up on my coordinates. Now! Static answer me, rising, crackling like distant whispering. I repeated the command. Nothing. We're pulling back, I told Morales and the others. Slow and controlled. No one runs. Eyes on 360. What about the family? A volunteer protested. I pointed at the boot, the folded jacket, the empty backpacks. They're not here. Whatever did this is. Another rock crashed into the underbrush behind us. We retreated down the trail, a tight knot of bright jackets against the green. Every 30 seconds, the knocks came, sometimes to our left, sometimes to our right, always just far enough that we couldn't pin them down. The forest was utterly silent otherwise. No birds, no wind, just us and the knocking and the soft thud of thrown stones. My heart hammered against my ribs. My training screamed at me that this was a threat we didn't understand. And you don't win against threats you don't understand by playing hero. Half a mile down, the radio cleared suddenly. Pete, all units, report status. Reyes's voice snapped through, sharp with concern. 1 here. I gasped. We're en route back to Trailhead. Unknown actors in area throwing rocks and making percussive sounds. Possible ambush behavior. He was silent for a beat. Copy 1. All units returned to base. Law enforcement en route. The knock stopped. Just stopped. The forest sound rolled back and gradually. A bird call here. A rustle there. By the time we reached the trailhead, it was as if someone had turned the world back on. The tape. If this were a movie, the next scene would be us storming back in with heavily armed tactical units, thermal drones sweeping the forest, and some kind of dramatic showdown. That's not how it went. County deputies showed up, took statements, hiked into the clearing where the family's gear lay, and photographed everything. They bagged the rock that had hit the tree. They collected my body cam. Then, just like with Barnes, the official narrative started quietly bending. The next morning, a memo went out from Region. Subject: Incident 23 to 147. Clearwater MP summary. Family of 5 missing on Clearwater Falls Trail. Preliminary investigation suggests disorientation due to severe weather and potential voluntary off-trail travel. No evidence of foul play at this time. No evidence of foul play. I read that line 3 times. Rocks thrown at rescuers. Deliberate knocking. Gear arranged like a display. And we were calling it disorientation. When my body cam was returned, the file directory looked normal. Date timestamp, size, except the middle 15 minutes. From the first knock to the moment the radio cleared. We're gone. Not corrupted. Not static. Just missing. The file jumped from us entering the clearing to us halfway back down the trail, breathing hard, looking rattled. I marched the camera straight into Reyes's office, tossed it onto his desk. You want to tell me what the hell this is? I demanded. He didn't pretend not to understand. He just sighed, rubbed his eyes, and closed the blinds. Sit down, Hart. I'll stand. Suit yourself. He leaned back. You're not the first one to have footage go missing. That rocked me. Excuse me. About 5 years ago, Trail Cam Project up in C7 started catching anomalies, big heat signatures on thermal with no visible match on the daylight cams, trees moving with no wind, audio spikes, knocks, howls, what everyone called them. I stared. And you didn't think that was relevant to our work? I thought it was above our pay grade. Which it is. He opened a drawer, pulled out a file folder so thin it was almost symbolic, and dropped it on the desk. Officially, he said, Clearwater National Park has no confirmed sightings of any unknown primate species. Unofficially, every superintendent going back 30 years has a folder like this shoved at them during orientation. I opened it. Inside were photocopied reports, blurry photos of impressions in mud that could have been oversized footprints, hand-drawn maps, incident summaries that dance around specifics. One showed a patrol ranger in 1998 describing large bipedal subject seen at 200 yards, dark brown hair, upright gait, height estimated 8 to 9 feet. Attached to each report was a stamped note, and no further action. We call it Walker in the notes. Reyes said quietly. Some call it Sasquatch. Some call it Bigfoot. Nobody says it on open radio. And nobody writes it in formal reports anymore. Not if they like their careers. I flipped through page after page, the cold in my stomach spreading. How many cases? I asked. He exhaled through his nose. Region's unofficial tally for unresolved disappearances in probable Walker habitat is north of 200. That's Clearwater, adjacent forests, and linked ranges. 200, I repeated, stunned. 200 vanished hikers. And we've been telling the public it's bad weather and poor preparation. Sometimes it is, he said. Sometimes it's cliffs and rivers and stupidity. But not always. And the problem is, the moment you start talking monsters, you lose the room. You lose funding. You get labeled unstable. They reassign you to a desk in D.C. or they encourage early retirement. I slammed the folder shut. So we do nothing? We keep sending people into Walker country and hope it's one of the times nothing happens. What do you suggest? He snapped. Putting out a bulletin? Attention visitors! Please be advised, unknown large primate may abduct you between mile markers 3 and 5. You want to watch Congress gut our budget and close the park entirely? Because that's the best case scenario if this goes public. I stepped closer to the desk, lowering my voice. A family of 5 disappeared yesterday. A guy named Barnes vanished 3 weeks ago. That's 6 people in under a month. And that's just the ones we know about. We got a moral obligation to do more than shrug and say the forest keeps what it wants. Reyes looked old suddenly. Not in years, but in weight. Off the record, he said, sometimes I think the forest is the least of our problems here. That stopped me. Meaning what? He hesitated. Then, 2 years ago, we had a team from, let's call it a partner agency, come through. Not Fish and Wildlife, not FBI. Think black SUVs, no insignia. They installed sensors out in C7, took soil samples, hauled out at least 2 seal crates big enough to fit a man. Never told us what they found. Just gave us a verbal directive. Do not pursue non-human explanations for visitor disappearances in Unit C7. Focus on safety messaging and response. My skin crawled. They're covering it up. He shrugged helplessly. They're managing it, containing it. Pick a word that helps you sleep. Does it help you sleep? He didn't answer. We need to go back into that triangle, I said. We need to see what's really there. Absolutely not, he snapped. We go back when we have a new lead, and we go back with more bodies, more gear, and clear ROE. You! The radio on his desk crackled to life. Base, this is Tower, came the voice of the fire lookout up on Crescent Peak. You got a second? Reyes grabbed the handset. Go ahead, Tower. Yeah, I got something on the south-facing camera here. I think you'll want to see. Sending you the feed now. He double-clicked an icon on his monitor. A grainy live video feed popped up, overlooking the broad sweep of forest that made up the triangle. Trees rippled in the breeze like a green ocean. Zoom, Tower said. Reyes tapped a key. The image tightened on a clearing about a mile from Iron Neck Ridge. At first, I thought it was just shadows. Then the shape moved. It stepped out from the tree line with a slow, deliberate gait. It was massive, easily 8 feet tall, shoulders twice as broad as any human I'd ever seen. Dark hair covered its body, but this wasn't the shaggy, indistinct blob of a tabloid photo. This was clear enough to see the muscle beneath the fur, the powerful articulation of thigh and calf. It paused in the center of the clearing, head turning slightly, as if listening. I realized I was holding my breath. Jesus Christ, I whispered. The thing, Walker, Bigfoot, whatever label you want, looked up, not at the camera. At us. Or at least, that's how it felt. Its face was partially shadowed, but I could make out deep-set eyes, a flattened nose, a heavy brow. Not animal, not human, something in between. For a heartbeat, I had the nauseating sensation that I was aware of being watched through not just a camera, but every screen it fed into. Then it raised one enormous arm. Its hand was disturbingly human, 5 fingers, thick and long. It curled them into a fist and struck a nearby tree trunk once hard. The video shook with the impact. Knock! The monitor flickered. Static washed across the image like a wave. Then the feed cut out entirely. Tower, we lost your visual. Reyes barked. Say again, did you see that subject with your own eyes? Silence. Tower, respond. Nothing. Just the faint hiss of an open but empty channel. He tried again. No answer. Then, after a long, suffocating moment, the radio spoke in a voice I didn't recognize. Low, rough, not quite human. Stop watching. The channel went dead. Reyes and I stared at each other, the implications hanging between us like a noose. My mouth was dry. You asked what I suggest. I managed. Here it is. He swallowed. I'm listening. We keep looking, I said, even if they tell us not to. Even if whatever that is doesn't want to be seen. Because whatever is happening out there isn't just random. It's targeted. It's organized. And I don't buy for a second that it ends with hikers. My hand rested on the thin folder between us. 19 names circled in yellow. 200 tallied in someone's hidden spreadsheet. Somebody out there knows the real numbers, I said, and I'm going to find out what else Walker is hiding. I didn't know then how literal that was going to be. I didn't know that Walker, the thing in the clearing, would be the one to show me, or that the dark truth behind those missing hikers was far worse than an 8-foot primate dragging people into the woods. Because Bigfoot wasn't hunting them. It was trying to protect them. For the next week, everything felt wrong in a very human way. We had law enforcement combing the waterfall trail and the surrounding area, drones buzzing overhead, sniffing dogs flown in from 2 counties over. News vans started showing up at the park gate, at first local, then regional. They camped outside like vultures, shoving cameras in the faces of any ranger stupid enough to walk past in uniform. Officially, the line was, "The family may have left the park voluntarily after the storm. We're exploring all possibilities." Unofficially, search teams were told to stay out of C7 until further notice, pending ongoing interagency safety assessments. I'd seen that trick before. When the higher-ups didn't want more eyes on a problem, they wrapped it in safety. On day 3 of the media circus, a convoy rolled in, 3 black SUVs, no plates on the front, dark tint. They slid past the visitor center and ranger housing without slowing, heading straight for the maintenance yard behind the SAR office. Reyes met them. I watched through the blinds from a briefing room, him standing with arms crossed as 3 men and a woman climbed out. They weren't wearing badges, but I didn't need one to see what they were. Career feds or something close enough it didn't matter. Plain clothes that tried too hard to look like just regular folks. Brand new hiking boots, tactical watches, neutral fleece jackets, hair regulation short. One of the men, tall, buzz-cut, face like a granite block, shook Reyes' hand. The woman did most of the talking. I couldn't hear them through the glass, but I saw the body language. She talked. Reyes argued. Granite Face watched the building, the tree line, everything but the conversation. A few minutes later, Reyes came inside and called a staff meeting. We crowded into the SAR briefing room. Rangers, trail crews, the desk staff, even McCready. The 4 newcomers stood against the wall, just far enough back to make it clear who was in charge without having to say it. Reyes looked like he'd had no sleep and too many cups of coffee. "Listen up," he said. "We got partners joining us on site for a while. They're here to assist with the missing family investigation and to evaluate some anomalies we've been experiencing." The woman stepped forward, early 40s, dark hair in a tight bun, eyes that flicked over the room like a scanner. "I'm Special Agent Collins," she said. Didn't say from where. "You can think of us as a federal multi-agency task force. Our concern is public safety and containment of potential threats within federal lands. Containment, not elimination, not investigation. Containment. We'll be reviewing past case files, trail cam data, and SAR reports for Clearwater and adjacent forests." Collins went on. "We'll also be installing additional monitoring equipment in certain units. For the duration of this operation, access to Unit C7 is restricted to personnel cleared by my team. If you're asked for your footage, your notes, or your recollections of specific incidents, you'll provide them promptly and completely. Any questions?" Hands stayed down. Nobody wanted to be on her radar. I raised mine anyway. "Yeah," I said. "What's the potential threat we're talking about?" Her eyes drifted to me. "And you are Hart, SAR Tech." She nodded like she'd already read a file on me. Maybe she had. "Mr. Hart, sometimes the specific nature of a threat is less important than its effects. In this case, the effect is missing persons in a defined area with unusual commonalities. Your job is not to categorize. It's to respond to emergencies and follow directives." "Understood." "Understood," I said. But that wasn't an answer. Her mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not the kind that reached eyes. "You're used to being the one going into the woods," she said. "Consider this a temporary reassignment to the role of supporting staff. There are things in Unit C7 we're better equipped to handle than you are. Think of us as pest control." McCready made a soft, derisive sound. Collins's gaze snapped to him, then back to Reyes. "Supervisor Reyes," she said, "I'd also like a word in private with Mr. Hart when we're done here. I understand he's had frontline exposure to some of these anomalies." My jaw tightened. Frontline exposure. That was one way to describe having rocks hurled at your head by a thing you weren't supposed to believe in. Meeting adjourned. Reyes said, "You heard her. C7 is off limits unless you're explicitly authorized. That's not a suggestion." People filtered out. some grumbling under their breath. When they were gone, Collins gestured to a chair. "Sit, Hart." I stayed standing. "I'm good." Granite-Face stepped closer, just enough to make his point. I sat. Collins didn't bother with small talk. She placed a manila folder on the table, slid it toward me. "Your body cam from the waterfall incident," she said. "I'm sure you noticed portions missing." "Yeah," I said. "I'm old-fashioned that way. I like my evidence unedited." Her expression didn't change. "The missing segments contain audio and visual data we deemed too sensitive for general circulation. That decision was made in consultation with people above my clearance. It's not a personal slight. You cut out the part where something the size of a dump truck was throwing rocks at us from nowhere." "Did you see it?" she asked. "No, but—" "Then what you have," she said crisply, "is a rock and a scary story, both of which you described sufficiently in your verbal report. You did good work out there. Hart, you kept your team alive. That's why I'm talking to you, instead of pulling your creds and sending you home. Should I be thanking you?" "Yes," she said, dead serious. "Because I'm going to be very clear. If you keep pushing it this way you have been, you will get yourself killed. Or you'll get someone else killed. Or you'll make my life so complicated I'll have to bury you in a basement in D.C. under a mountain of paperwork." That last part was probably a joke. Mostly, "I'm not trying to interfere with your investigation," I said. "I just want to know what's taking people out there." She regarded me for a beat, then leaned back. "There are 3 working models," she said. 1. Human predation. Serial offenders with a good understanding of rough terrain and law enforcement response. 2. Environmental events that are poorly understood. Microbursts, localized magnetic anomalies, terrain traps, that sort of thing. 3. Non-standard biological entities. Officially, the 3rd category does not exist. But unofficially, I said, you've got a name for it. Unofficially, we use the term NB, 3 for large unidentified primate-like bipedal subjects. You call it Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Walker, doesn't matter. What matters is this. We don't have a confirmed kill, a captured specimen, or a body. We have tracks, audio, uncorroborated sightings, and a cluster of disappearances that may or may not be related. You've seen the same numbers I have. I said, you know damn well they're related. She shrugged. Correlation is not causation. That line keeps congressmen calm. I stared at her. You got sensors in the triangle. I said, trail cams, thermal, audio. You're not here for the first time. You're here because something changed. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not fear, exactly. Wariness. Go home, Hart, she said softly. Take a few days. See your family, if you have one. Drink something expensive. Let the professionals work. That's the thing, I said. We are the professionals. We're the ones who go in when everyone else is writing memos. Whatever's out there doesn't give a damn about your clearance level. Granite-Face shifted, about to say something, but Collins put a hand up. You're not going to let this go, are you? She asked. No. She sighed like a teacher whose favorite troublesome student had just flunked another test. Then do me one favor, she said. If you go back into C7 on your own, don't radio for help. We can't save you from the thing you're trying to chase. All we can do is keep your last words off the record. Midnight in C7. 3 nights later, I broke the rules. Call it ego. Call it obsession. Call it survivor's guilt over every name in that thin file. I called it what it felt like. Necessity. Clearwater has a curfew of sorts. Officially, the trails close at sundown. Unofficially, rangers and maintenance crews are out past dark all the time. The park never really sleeps. It just goes quiet. At 23:30, the SAR bay was dark. The SUVs were still in the lot. Collins's team burning midnight oil in some secure corner of the compound. Reyes had gone home 4 hours earlier. The only person on duty in the station was a seasonal kid, half asleep at the front desk, earphones in. I used my key card to slip into the gear room, pulled a radio, checked the battery, grabbed my pack, headlamp, first aid kit. On a last-second impulse, I opened the weapons locker. Saw our techs don't carry sidearms in the field as a rule. Liability, optics, a dozen other reasons. This wasn't an SAR call. I signed out a Glock 22 under my own name and scrawled Night Range Qual in the log. Loaded 3 mags. Slid the rig under my jacket. Outside, the rain had thinned to mist. The sky above the tree was a dull, starless smear. I didn't take a park truck. Too obvious. I took my own scarred Tacoma, drove with the lights off until I hit the back service road that skirted the edge of C7. The deeper I went, the more my rational brain screamed at me. Going solo into restricted backcountry at midnight to chase an 8-foot question mark? It wasn't brave. It was suicidal. I kept driving. The service road dead-ended at an old logging spur that had been closed to the public for decades. A rusted gate blocked it off, an old vehicle access sign hanging crooked. I parked before the gate, killed the engine. For a moment, I just sat there listening. The forest at night has a specific sound, not the sharp daytime chatter of birds, but a softer, layered presence. Crickets, distant owls, the occasional crack of a branch from something moving through the underbrush. Tonight, it felt like a room where someone had just said something they shouldn't. A tension in the air, like the trees were holding their breath. I stepped out, shouldered my pack, and climbed over the gate. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Follow the old spur until it intersected with the eastern edge of the triangle, then pushing toward the cluster point of the past disappearances. I had GPS coordinates loaded, waypoints marked from old case files. I told myself I was looking for physical evidence. Unmapped mine shafts, sinkholes, signs of human activity, camps, caches, anything that could explain people vanishing without a trace. Sure, a mile up the spur, I killed my headlamp and let my eyes adjust. Clouds shredded apart, giving me slivers of moonlight. The trees loomed like black columns on either side of the overgrown roadbed. I switched my radio to a TAC channel, one that wasn't being monitored by dispatch. Thumbed the transmit button. "This is Hart," I said quietly. Time is 0:17. Entering C7 Eastern Perimeter, old logging spur Alpha. Solo, self-deployed. Objective, recon only. My own voice sounded small in my ears. Stupid, too. But narrating grounds you. It makes the situation feel controllable, even when it isn't. The road narrowed, choked by alder and vine maple. After another 15 minutes, I stepped off into true backcountry, following the GPS arrow as it pointed me toward empty space. Branches clawed at my jacket. Wet ferns slapped against my legs. Every few yards I paused, listening. At first, all I heard was my own breath. Then, gradually, the forest sounds faded. At first, I thought it was just me noticing them less as I focused on the terrain. But no, this was different. The cricket noise dwindled, like someone sliding a volume knob down. The distant owl calls cut off mid-hoot. The silence came in layers, top down, bottom up, until all that was left was my heartbeat in my ears and the faint hum of blood. My throat went dry. Environmental sound dampening noted. I whispered, because if I didn't say something, I was going to bolt. No wind, no insect or avian calls. The GPS beeped softly. I'd reached the edge of the cluster zone, the rough center point of 19 disappearances. I was standing in an unremarkable patch of forest, gently sloping ground, thick duff underfoot, moss-coated logs. No cliffs, no visible hazards. The kind of place you bring kids to teach them about ecology. My headlamp picked out a rotten stump a few yards ahead. Something about it made me step closer. It wasn't the stump. It was the pattern of stones arranged on top of it. 3 rounded rocks, 1 large, 2 smaller, set in a triangle. White quartz against the dark, wet wood. They'd been placed recently. There was no moss on them, no leaf litter. A territorial marker? A warning? Okay, I muttered. You wanted me here. I'm here. A part of me expected that to be the trigger. For someone to sprint out of the darkness. For teeth and claws and a brief, ugly end. Instead, the reply came a sound. Knock. A single, deep strike. Not close, not far. Just loud. My body reacted before my brain did. Adrenaline dumped into my system, heart rate spiking. I forced myself to stay still, knees unlocked, weight balanced. Copy that. I said hoarsely, because I talk to threats sometimes. You've got my attention. Nothing. Then, knock knock. Two more, slightly to my left this time. Directionality unclear. I said out of habit, though this wasn't going on any official report. Why the hell am I talking like a clipboard? I muttered to myself. The next rock came in slow. I heard it first, a faint whistling, the sound of displacement. I pivoted, headlamp catching it midair. It wasn't thrown hard, not like the ones at the waterfall trail. It arced toward me lazily, like a softball toss in practice. I lifted a hand and knocked it aside on reflex. It hit the ground, rolled up against my boot, and stopped. White quartz, same as the stones on the stump. My heart hammered. Not an attack. I said slowly, communication. My skin crawled at my own choice of word. Communication implied intention. Intention implied mind. The air felt thicker now. The silence was no longer just absence of sound. It was presence, an attention pressing in from all sides. I took a breath, reached down and picked up the rock. It was cold, heavier than it looked. I turned it over my palm, looking for markings. Nothing. Against every instinct honed by a decade of risk assessments, I did the stupidest thing I've ever done. I threw it back. Not hard, just a gentle underhand toss into the darkness in the direction it had come from. It vanished into the black. No thud, no crack of impact. The silence stretched. Then the woods exploded in noise. Not physical noise. Not at first. It was inside my skull. A low-frequency vibration, like a freight train far underground, built behind my eyes. Static crawled along my teeth. My vision shimmered at the edges, trees warping. I dropped to one knee, hand braced in the duff. Fuck, I gasped. The radio on my shoulder screeched, frantic feedback tearing through the static. Art, a voice warbled. Get the hell? The rest drowned in white noise. The pressure in my head spiked, then snapped like a rubber band. I sucked in air, retching. When my vision cleared, I wasn't alone. Walker, he was 30 feet away. I say he because that was my instinct, male, not from any obvious anatomy. The proportions, the mass, the bearing. He was standing partially behind a cedar trunk, as if testing the distance. If he wanted to stay hidden, he could have, but he didn't. He wanted me to see him. 8, maybe 9 feet tall. Shoulders so broad, they made the tree look thin. Dark hair matted with rain and needles, hanging in dense curtains over corded muscle. The head was slightly conical, crest rising above a heavy brow. The eyes were the worst part. They weren't animal eyes. I've seen bear eyes, cougar eyes, elk, wolf. This was different. Deep-set, forward-facing, dark but reflective. Aware. He watched me with the same kind of focus assessment I use on suspects in bad situations. I realized my hand had drifted toward my sidearm. I forced it back up, fingers splayed to show they were empty. Okay, I said, voice raw. Okay, you got me. He blinked slowly. My rational brain scrambled to categorize. Gigantopithecus remnant? Unknown hominid? Mass hallucination from infrasound? He took a step forward. The movement was smooth, almost impossibly so for something that size. No bounce, no wobble, just controlled placement of a massive foot. Then the next, he was barefoot. I saw the outline of toes sinking into the duff. My own feet wanted to backpedal. I kept them planted. You heard any of those people? I asked. The hikers. Barnes. The family. I don't know what I expected. A growl. A charge. Indifference. What I got was expression. His brow furrowed. The lines of the face shifted. It was like watching someone hear an accusation they genuinely didn't understand, then realized the weight of it. He made a sound. Not the howl people talk about. Not a grunt. A low, resonant, HRNN, somewhere between a hum and a groan. It vibrated in my sternum. He lifted one arm slowly, thick fingers uncurling. Then Deliberately, he bent the elbow and brought his hand to his chest. Thump. He struck his chest once, open-palmed. Not hard, nothing like the tree knocks. A muted, solid sound. I stared. My brain offered up associations like flashcards. Me. This one. He turned then. Not away. Just enough that his shoulder angled toward me. He looked over, it met my eyes, and made a short, sharp jerk of his head. Come. Everything in my training screamed never follow a lure. Never go where you don't control the exit. Never go deeper when you're already in over your head. I followed, because whatever was happening here would not be understood from the safe side of a road or a desk. And because some stupid, primal part of me believed he could have killed me already if he'd wanted to. We moved through the trees in a strange, loping tandem, him gliding ahead, me stumbling behind, trying not to lose him in the dark. He didn't move in a straight line. He flowed around obstacles like water, barely disturbing branches that slapped me in the face. Every so often he'd glance back, checking that I was still there. The forest around us did something I can only describe as warping. Distances felt wrong. Landmarks didn't behave. I'd swear we were moving downhill, but my GPS altitude ticked up. My sense of direction spun, compass spinning even harder. We passed a boulder that looked like a hunch figure. 50 yards later, we passed it again from a different angle. My breath turned shallow, not from exertion, from the creeping realization that this wasn't just about a big ape in the woods. Something in the triangle bent more than rules. It bent space. Where are you taking me? I whispered. He didn't answer, obviously, but his pace slowed. The trees thinned. I smelled something then, damp stone, old air, a void in the living smell of the forest. We broke into a small hidden ravine. From above, it would have been invisible, just another wrinkle in the landscape. From within, it felt like a wound. Rock walls rose on either side, slick with moss. At the far end, half hidden by hanging roots and ferns, yawned a narrow black opening. A cave mouth, maybe 4 feet high, 6 across. Every instinct screamed not to go in there. Walker stopped 10 feet from the entrance. He turned to face me. Up close, the details were worse. There were scars and hair on his arms, pale lines of healed skin. One I had a faint milky film at the outer edge, like an old injury. His chest rose and fell slowly, controlled. He pointed, big, thick finger, directly at the opening. No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. I'm not crawling into a hole in the ground with you. That's not happening. His brow drew together. He huffed, air bursting from his nostrils in a warm, damp gust that carried a smell like wet dog, pine pitch, and something musky unfamiliar. He pointed again. Then, to my surprise, he thumped his fist on the rock wall beside him. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't as loud as the tree knocks, but it was the same pattern. He pointed to the cave, then to me, then to his own chest. A crude syntax. There. You. Me. I shook my head, heart pounding. If I go in there, I may not come back out. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he did something I didn't expect from an animal or a monster or whatever label you want. He knelt, huge body folding at the knees, lowering until his head was almost level with mine. The rock under his weight didn't so much as crack. He lifted one hand slowly, slow enough I could draw my gun 10 times, and placed it flat on his own chest again. Thump. His eyes, dark and unsettlingly human, locked on mine. There was something in them I had not been prepared for. Not hunger, not malice, urgency. And beneath that, buried deep like a coal under ash, grief. My throat tightened. You're trying to show me, I whispered. Not lure, warn. He didn't understand the words, but he understood tone. His shoulders eased minutely. I looked at the cave. Everything in my life had led me to this edge. The cold cases, the file, the missing minutes of tape, the family that told their kid to run. This is so fucking stupid, I muttered. I pulled my headlamp down, ratcheted the strap tighter around my skull, checked the fresh mag seated in the Glock, then holstered it. clipped my radio to my front strap for easy access, knowing damn well it probably wouldn't work underground. Then I crouched and went into the dark, under the skin of the mountain. The entrance forced me onto all fours. Wet stones scraped my gloves, cold against my knees. The air shifted immediately, dropping 10 degrees, picking up a mineral tang. The beam of my headlamp carved a narrow tunnel of white through black. Behind me, I heard a dragging, scraping sound. I twisted to look. Walker was coming in after me. He had to contort, shoulders twisting, body compressing a way that made my joints ache in sympathy. The stone walls brushed his fur on both sides, showering grit. For a moment he wedged, foot scrabbling for purchase. Then he surged forward, exhaling in a low grunt. Being ahead of him in that tube was a lot. If he wanted to, he could have grabbed my legs, snapped my spine, crushed my skull against the rock. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to fight. Instead, he stayed a body length behind, breath rasping softly. The tunnel sloped down gradually. After maybe 20 feet, it opened abruptly into a chamber. I straightened carefully, vertebrae popping. The ceiling rose to about 12 feet, a bubble in the rock. My lamp caught glittering veins of something in the walls, like quartz or mica. The floor was uneven, scattered with loose stones and bone-pale shapes. For a second, my brain refused to identify them. Then it did. Bones. Lots of them. I swallowed. Heart jackhammering. Femurs. Ribs. Vertebrae. Some small, some large. They were scattered, not arranged, jumbled in drifts like pale tumbleweeds. The smell hit me then. Not fresh rot. This was old death. Dry. Coated in earth, mixed with the stale breath of the cave. Under it, faint but clear, the ammoniac tang of animal dens. Christ, I whispered. Walker squeezed into the chamber behind me. He had to hunch, head brushing the ceiling. He looked even bigger in confined space. He moved past me with surprising delicacy, stepping over bones without crunching them. He crossed the far wall, where the rock bulged inward. There, half hidden in shadow, was another opening. This one wasn't a natural hole. It was worked. The edges were too straight, the outline too regular. Rough, but deliberately cut. The rock around it was stained darker, as if something had seeped out repeatedly over time. My breath fogged in the beam. Walker didn't try to go into that passage. He wouldn't get within 3 feet of it. Instead, he planted himself facing it, shoulders squared, like a guard dog at the gate of hell. He looked at me, then at the opening, then at me again. Is this where they went? I asked. The hikers. I stepped carefully among the bones, hard in my throat. My lamp picked out details, turning horror into evidence. Most of the remains weren't human. Elk, deer, smaller mammals. I saw a bear's skull, teeth yellow in the light, but interspersed among them, here and there, were shapes that didn't belong to any forest animal. A human mandible, molars intact. A radius. A handful of finger bones. Shreds of synthetic fabric caught on a jagged rock. Colors faded but unmistakable. Blue nylon. Logo partially visible. Pa of Patagonia. My throat closed. Kyle Barnes, I whispered. Or what's left of him. Not all of the bones were old. Near the edge of the chamber lay a shoe still mostly intact. A child's sneaker, mud-caked. The laces had been tied in a double knot. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second. Connor's family. I said, Jesus. Walker made a sound. Not loud. A low, almost conversational rumble. It vibrated in my chest. He pointed at the worked opening again. Then he did something very deliberate. He tapped his own chest twice, then swept his hand in a slow arc around the chamber. Around the bones. Around me. Then he stabbed his finger toward the hole and shook his head sharply. The meaning slammed into place. Me slash mine slash us here. Them, there. Not us. You're not the one doing this, I said, more to myself than to him. You're containing it. He stared at the black rectangle in the wall with naked hate. I'd seen that expression before. On soldiers looking at insurgent nests. On parents looking at drunk drivers. on my own face in a mirror after particularly bad scenes. He hated whatever was in there. Something dripped in the darkness of the hole. Not water. The sound was too viscous, too slow. "Have you gone in?" I asked him quietly. He flinched. Not much. Barely half an inch. But on a creature that radiated physical dominance like heat, it was striking. He huffed, shook his head. "Not can't. Won't." I stepped closer to the opening, against all reason. A cold wafted out, different from the cave air. This was thin, almost metallic. My skin prickled. I lifted my lamp. The beam only went a few feet in before the darkness seemed to swallow it, not in a way of distance, but like shining a light into ink. Shapes moved in the black. Not with motion. There was no visible movement. More like the suggestion of contours rearranging behind smoke glass. A sound crawled out. It was the same low-frequency vibration I'd felt in the forest, but multiplied. It rattled my molars, buzzed in my sinuses. Patterns wrote it. Throbbing pulses that almost formed into something my brain wanted to mistake for words. I took a stumbling step back, suddenly dizzy. Walker's hand was suddenly on my shoulder. His touch was enormous. Fingers spanning from collarbone to scapula, but the pressure was carefully measured. Firm. Restraining, not crushing. He shoved me, gently for him, hard enough for me, away from the hole. My knees hit bone, skidded. I went down, palm stinging. He stepped between me and the opening, filling my entire field of view. For a moment, the sound pulsed stronger, as if reacting. Then it shifted. The pattern stuttered. A higher tone bled in, like interference. Walker made a sound back. It was almost like a tree knocked, without wood. A chest-deep thump, forced through vocal cords not made for it. It rolled through the chamber and slammed into my rib cage. The vibration from the hole recoiled, not like an animal afraid of fire, like a broadcast jammed by a stronger signal. My vision cleared by degrees. The buzzing eased. I realized I'd been holding my breath. "What the fuck?" I breathed. "What the actual?" He turned, huffed in my face, hot, damp air, and pointed urgently toward the entrance tunnel. "Out!" "Yeah." I croaked. "Yeah, okay." We retreated. I don't remember much about the crawl back. Just flashes. Stones scraping my shoulders, my breath too loud in confined space. The steady rasp behind me. We emerged into the ravine like drowning men, breaking the surface. The forest air tasted like life. Even the lingering silence felt better than that buzzing void. Walker straightened to his full height, chest heaving once, twice. He looked down at me. Up close, in the open, not in fight-or-flight freefall. I saw the age in him. Gray strands in the dark for around his face. Scars layered over scars. A heaviness in the set of his shoulders that had nothing to do with muscle and everything to do with burden. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked. He blinked slowly. Stupid question. That's what my brain does when it's overwhelmed. It falls back on interview techniques because they're familiar. People talk about you like a monster. I said, "We've blamed you for every missing hiker for 50 years. He tilted his head. "I know you can't understand the words." I went on, "But I think you get this." I pointed back toward the cave. "That," I said, "is the monster." His gaze followed my hand. He bared his teeth, not in a threat, but in something closer to a grimace. Pain and rage mixed. Then, slowly, he thumped his chest again. Thumped, and pointed not at himself, but at the forest around us. The trees, the ground, guard, protector, sentinel. It was projection, sure, anthropomorphizing. But standing there, staring up at something that could snap my spine like a twig, but had chosen instead to drag me into its own private nightmare. So I'd see the truth. I believed it. "You're trying to keep us out," I said, "because when we go in, we don't come back out whole. Or at all." He made a low sound. Not quite affirmation, not quite denial. A rough acknowledgement. My radio crackled. "RT?" The voice was mangled, tearing in and out of static. "If you can hear this, Keir Mike." I instinctively reached for it. Walker's head snapped toward the sound, nostrils flaring. I hesitated. If I keyed my mic now, Collins's team would have my bearing. They'd triangulate, come storming in with whatever toys they had in those SUVs. Part of me wanted that. Backup, sanity, someone else to share this madness with. Another part, the part that had just stared into a hole in a mountain that hummed with something that could hijack nerves and twist perception, was less sure. If they came here and whatever was in that tunnel got agitated, did I really want more bodies on the ground? Walker watched me like a man watches someone holding a grenade. I made a choice. I clicked the radio once. No voice, just a carrier signal. A breadcrumb saying alive without saying where. Then I unclipped it and set it gently on a nearby rock. I can't protect your secret, I told him. Not forever. People are going to keep coming. More than you can scare away with rocks. He blinked slowly. The lines around his eyes tightened. But I can tell them it's not you, I said. He didn't understand the grammar, but he understood intent. Tone, the way my hand, shaking slightly, touched the center of my own chest the same way he'd thumped his. For a moment, a stupid, human, unbearably small moment, we regarded each other across a gulf of species and history. Then he moved. Not toward me. Past me. He brushed by with that same impossible gentleness, a living wall of fur and muscle. Every hair on my arm stood up as he passed. My spine tingled. He walked the lip of the ravine and climbed out with barely a grunt, thick fingers finding holes in the damp rock. At the top, he paused. The silhouette he cut against the thin sliver of moonlight would have been mythic in any other context. A monster on the ridge, a shadow the size of a nightmare. He turned his head, just enough that I saw the half-profile of his face. Then, with a speed that made my breath catch, he melted into the trees and was gone. The cleanup, getting back to the truck, took an hour that felt like 10. The forest gradually turned back on around me. A chirp here, an insect buzz there, building toward the normal nighttime soundscape. By the time I hit the old logging spur, it almost sounded like any other night in the backcountry. Except my hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I reached the gate, there were 2 vehicles waiting. My Tacoma and a black SUV. Its headlights were off. 2 figures leaned against the front grille, silhouettes outlined by the faint glow of the dash. As I approached, one straightened. "Collins, eventful night, Hart?" she asked. I stopped 10 yards short. The Glock at my hip suddenly felt like a water pistol. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "Long enough to know you turned your radio into a beacon and then walked away from it," she said. "Which is a neat trick if you're trying not to be followed, but not neat enough." Granite Face, whose name I still didn't know, crossed his arms. "You went in to see Seven alone, after being explicitly ordered not to." "Yeah," I said. "I'm funny that way." Collins stepped closer. Her eyes glittered in the dim. "Did it talk to you?" she asked. "Walker." The fact that she used the in-house name told me more than any admission. "Not in words," I said. "In other ways." Her jaw tightened. "Did you see anything else?" Images flashed behind my eyes. The worked opening, bones scattered like dirty snow. The black that ate light, the vibration that wanted to rewrite my nervous system. "Yeah," I said. "I saw the place where your threat has been feeding." Granite Face's expression didn't change, but his posture did, a fractional lean forward, like a wolf scenting blood. "Describe it," Collins said. "No," I said. For a second, nobody moved. "You misunderstand your position," she said quietly. "You don't get to decide what you share." "You misunderstand yours." I shot back. "You're out of your depth. Whatever is under that mountain is not just some animal to tag and bag. It's something else." "Super helpful," Granite muttered. I took a breath, tried to rein it in. "Look," I said, "you've known about Walker for years. You've known people were disappearing in a pattern that profilers would kill for, and you've been treating it like a PR problem instead of an existential one. The only existential threat to this park is panic," Collins snapped. "You think people will keep coming here, keep supporting its existence, if they believe there's a man-eating monster under the trails?" "There is," I said, "but it's not the one people think." Her expression flickered. What did it show you? She asked softer. A feeding chamber, I said bluntly. Bones. Human and otherwise. A worked tunnel in the rock that doesn't look like mine work or natural erosion. And something in there that projects infrasound or EM or whatever the hell you want to call what nearly liquefied my brain. She flinched at worked tunnel. It was tiny, barely there, but I saw it. You knew, I said slowly. You already knew about the structure. That's why you're here now, not just for the missing family. You found an entrance before. We've found several, she said reluctantly. Most are collapsed. Some are active. We've been trying to map them, contain them. How's that working out? She didn't answer, which was an answer. Walker's job is the same as yours. I went on, to keep people away from those holes. You just have different methods. His methods involve terrorizing civilians and stockpiling corpses. Granite said flatly, he's not stockpiling them. I snapped. He's cleaning the edges, skimming what he can when they don't make it back out. Maybe trying to give them some kind of barrier. It sounded crazy out loud, but in the cave, it hadn't felt that way. The sense I'd gotten was of something standing in front of a tidal wave with a bucket. The kid's shoe, I added quietly. Still tied. That shut him up. You're assuming a lot about his intentions, Colin said. We have no guarantee it's not working with whatever's in those tunnels. If that were true, I'd be dead, I said. It had me alone, underground, half-blind. She studied my face. Why didn't you call for help? She asked. From down there. Because if you'd come with guns and toys and a mandate to neutralize threats, you'd have gone straight for Walker, I said. And then nothing would stand between you and that thing. You'd throw bodies at it until somebody with more stars on their shoulder decided it wasn't worth the risk and dropped a bunker buster on half the park. Her silence told me I wasn't far off. We can't let this go public, she said finally. I'm not talking about a press conference, I said. I'm talking about the way you write your reports, the way you brief your superiors. Right now, the story is stupid hikers get lost in dangerous terrain. That story gets people killed. The new story is there's a hazard in C7 we don't understand, and one of the biggest myths on the continent is the only thing holding the line. Granite snorted. You want us to pitch Bigfoot as a park ranger? If the boot fits, I said. Collins actually smiled at that, just for a second. Then it was gone. You've put us in a difficult position, Hart, she said. Story of my life. If we write you up for insubordination and pull your creds, you'll talk, she went on. You'll go to a reporter or a forum or whatever corner the internet indulges people who say, I saw Bigfoot and a hole to hell. Probably, I said, I'm an asshole when I feel dismissed. If we don't, you stay in the system, she continued. You get access to information, to scenes, to people. You become part of the problem we're trying to manage. What you're really afraid of, I said, is not that I'll talk. It's that I'll find something you missed. Her eyes met mine dead on. Are you going to? Yes, I said, because I've looked into that hole now. I can't unsee it. I can't go back to telling parents their kid just got lost. That would be a lie I couldn't live with. She was quiet for a long time. Four sounds murmured around us. Finally, all right, she said. Here's the deal. Granite stiffened. Ma'am. Save it, she snapped. Hart's going to do what Hart's going to do. We can either keep tripping over him in the dark or point him where we want him and hope he hits something useful before he dies. Comforting, I muttered. You will not go into those tunnels again, she said, voice like steel. You will not attempt to engage whatever is in there. You will not disclose their existence in any document that has a chance of going above my desk. In return, I asked, in return, I will acknowledge in my internal memo that MB3 demonstrates territorial defense behavior against tunnel access points, she said. That its threat profile toward humans is ambiguous, but possibly defensive rather than predatory. That aligns with what little we have. It may buy a consideration. They're going to try to kill it eventually, I said. They're going to try to understand it, she corrected. Which looks like killing from the other side. Not good enough. It's all you're getting, she said. The other option is you wake up tomorrow reassigned to a visitor center in Ohio with a mild but persistent headache and a sudden disinterest in national parks. I believed her. I also believed she was more scared than she let on, not of Walker, of the possibility that our myths had been grossly misfiled, that the thing people made fun of on T-shirts might be closer to ally than monster. Fine, I said. I stay topside. I don't write hold to hell in my reports, but I'm not going to stop going into C7 when people go missing there. That, she said, is your job. We stood in the dark, 3 humans in a silence full of unseen eyes. Somewhere, deep under the mountain, something pulsed. I felt it in the soles of my feet. And somewhere else, high in the trees, something big moved with impossible quiet. Walker, circling the perimeter, doing his rounds. Walker's truth. Over the next month, the disappearances changed. We still had overdue hikers, broken ankles, stupid tourists trying a selfie on cliff edges. But in C7, nothing, not no incidents, no vanishings. Drones picked up fleeting heat signatures in the canopy. Trail cams caught glimpses of massive shapes moving between trees, always just beyond clarity. Infrasound monitors at Collins's people had installed registered spikes near certain known tunnel sites, but the patterns were different, shorter bursts, quickly jammed by counterwaves. Like something is answering, one of their techs muttered once, not realizing his mic was hot. We found signs sometimes. A boot lying neatly at the edge of a game trail, laces intact. No tracks leading away. 30 yards downslope, we'd find a hiker, sitting on a log, shaking, sobbing. No memory of how they'd gotten there. No injuries beyond minor scrapes. A vague, half-remembered sense of a big shadow between them and something else. Every time, the coordinates lined up within 100 yards of a tunnel entrance on Collins's secret map. Every time, in the mud nearby, we'd find prints. Huge, human-like, with clear toes. One step here, one there. No trail, just presence. We never put them in the official logs. Not once. Every time, the excuse was the same. Ground too disturbed for clear tracks. I started keeping my own map. Old incidents. New ones. Rock piles that didn't belong. Quartz triangles on stumps. And sightings. People talk more when they realize you're not going to laugh at them. A hunter who swore he'd seen a big guy in a fur coat leading him away from a fog bank that had no business being where it was. A botanist who woke from a sudden fainting spell on a ridge, convinced she'd been moved 30 feet uphill, but too embarrassed to write in her field notes. A teenage girl who'd snuck out to smoke with her friends and come back pale, insisting that something big had stood between them and the river when they almost stumbled over the edge. Piece by piece, a picture emerged that the official folders had hints of but never fully outlined. Walker wasn't a singular. He was part of a population, small, scattered, but present. And their territory markers, rocks, knocks, deadfalls, clustered around places where the mountain skin was thin, places like that cave. Every time I felt tempted to go back, I'd remember the feeling of my nerves being plucked like harp strings, the bone drifts, the way Walker had looked at the opening. Whatever was under there, it wasn't just eating bodies. It was wearing something deeper away. Psyches, memories, maybe more. Bigfoot, the thing everyone mocked, had been standing watch over that for a very long time. How long? Long enough that some of the oldest bones in those chambers had tool marks on them from stone blades. We know that now because Collins's pest control team pulled a few quietly under guise of geological sampling. She showed me one once, late at night in the SAR office, both of us pretending we weren't becoming co-conspirators. The femur had been gnawed. The cuts on it weren't from modern tools. Pre-contact, she said. Maybe older. So this has been going on since before we got here. I said. Before we put names on maps, she said. Before we built roads. Before we decided these places were parks. Before we renamed Walker Country, Clearwater, and started printing brochures. She didn't argue. Why I'm telling you this. If you've stuck with me this far, you probably want some tidy resolution. There isn't one. We never got the family back. We never found all of Barnes. The official line stayed the same. Difficult terrain, unpredictable weather, tragic accidents. Maybe, in a corner of Server Farm somewhere, there's a file with a more honest header. NB, 3/Undermountain Interface, or some other sanitized label. On paper, I'm still just a SAR tech who burned out. I handed in my resignation 3 months after that night in C7. Cited mental health, which wasn't entirely a lie. You don't keep going into the dark after you finally see the shape of it, not without either breaking or becoming something like it. Reyes hugged me on my last day. He never said, "I believe you," but he didn't have to. When I handed him the folded map I'd kept in my locker, the one with the quartz triangles and the tunnel markers, his hand shook. McCready pressed a small object into my palm in the parking lot. It was a rock. White quartz, worn smooth. 3 small notches carved into one edge. Found that on Highline back in '92, he said. Didn't know what it meant then. I do now. What does it mean? I asked. He shrugged. Depends who you ask. Could be a keep out sign. Could be a we're still here. You ever see him? I asked. Walker. He spat into his cup. Saw something. Once. Thought I was drunker than I was. You saying I wasn't? I'm saying you weren't imagining the knocks, I said. He nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. Figured that out the day after I found boot prints on top of the deadfall. I couldn't climb sober. We didn't hug. Guys like us don't. But there was a minute there where we might have if one of us had moved first. Collins didn't say goodbye. She didn't have to. 2 weeks before I left, she called me into her mobile command trailer. On the table between us lay a photo. Trail cam, time-stamped black and white. In the foreground, a tunnel entrance, similar to the one I crawled into, but narrower. In the background, partially obscured by brush. Something was emerging. It was wrong. Too many joints in the limbs. Skin that looked more like exposed root than flesh. No eyes, just a smooth, ridged surface where a face might be. In front of it, filling the frame, was Walker. Mouth open in a silent roar, arms wide, as if to block the entire world from what was behind him. His body was blurred slightly, motion or vibration. The thing behind him was sharp. The next frame was white, overexposed or held by some energy spike, according to the text. The camera died after that. They found it fused to the tree from the inside, circuits blown. How many of these do you have? I asked. Not enough to convince anyone who hasn't been within 10 yards of one, she said. More than enough to ruin a lot of people's sleep. You still think he's a primary threat? Her silence was answer enough. Why show me this? I asked. Because you're leaving, she said. And you're going to talk. Don't bother denying it. You'll change names, locations, details. Tell yourself you're writing fiction. My stomach dropped. You monitor that kind of thing? I asked. We monitor people like you, she said. And we decide what we can live with them saying. And this, I tapped the photo. You can live with this going around disguised? This. She slid it back into the folder. Most people will call it Photoshop and ask how much weed you were on when you wrote it. The few who believe you're the ones I'm more interested in. Why? Because belief is a kind of frequency, she said. There are things that notice certain frequencies. Walker's been trying to drown them out with knocks and noise for a long time. We're learning to help. You're going to use people's belief as bait, I said flatly. Maybe as a shield, she said. Maybe both. Depends who wins the budget argument next fiscal year. We looked at each other over the gulf. Don't go back, she said finally. No matter what you hear, no matter who calls, you've done your part. You know I can't promise that, I said. She sighed. Story of my life. So why am I telling you all this? Because out there, right now, somebody is planning a solo hike through terrain they don't understand, under a sky that doesn't care, across a mountain with holes in it. Because if they go missing, the story will be the same as it's always been. They slipped. They got lost. The forest took them. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes, though, they get too close to a door that should never have been cracked open. When that happens, Something under the mountain reaches up with hunger and infrasound and geometry our brains weren't built to parse. And between them and that thing, there's a line of giants we made into a joke. So the next time you're in deep woods and you hear 3 sharp knocks echoing through the trees, space just so, do me a favor. Don't go looking for Bigfoot. He's already found you. And if he's knocking, he's not trying to scare you. He's telling you to run. I walked away from the job, but the mountain didn't walk away from me. 6 months after I turned in my badge and cleared out my locker, I was living in a rented duplex 2 hours from Clearwater, pretending I could get used to traffic noise instead of tree knocks. I did contract safety trainings, the occasional corporate wilderness leadership workshop for executives who thought a 3-mile loop was an expedition. I slept badly and woke up when trucks hit potholes because, for a half second, it sounded like rocks. Then, one wet afternoon in early spring, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Yeah, I answered because I don't have the energy for hello anymore. Hart, a woman's voice said. It's Collins. What? You lost a memo out here in the suburbs. We lost a kid, she said, and we're about to lose more if we don't get this right. My stomach dropped. Where? C7, she said. North Side. Unauthorized youth group cut a switchback past a closed sign. 1's missing. 2 are refusing to leave the area because they say her voice keeps calling them from the dark trees. That phrase told me everything I needed to know. You have a team in there already? I asked. We have techs and rangers, she said. We do not have anyone who's been dragged to the edge and come back with their wits intact. Whether I like it or not, that's you. I'm not SAR now, I said. You've got people. Hart, she cut in. You want a happy ending to at least one of these? Get in your truck. Back into Walker country. I told myself a dozen reasons not to go on the drive up. I wasn't officially employed. I'd be violating half a dozen policies. I'd promised myself and been half blackmailed not to get sucked back into C7. None of it mattered. By the time I hit the service road, the sky had gone to flat, gunmetal gray that makes the forest look 2 stops darker. A light sleet was coming down, stinging when it hit skin. The staging area was controlled chaos. Trucks, an ambulance, one of Collins's SUVs, law enforcement trying and failing to look like this was just another search. Reyes was there. He looked older, but his eyes were the same. You look like shit, he said by way of greeting. You dragged me out of retirement in a hailstorm. I said, you're getting what you paid for. He didn't smile, but his shoulders eased half an inch. That's as close as we get to a hug. Collins walked up with a tablet tucked under one arm, and that same clipped efficiency, but there were tight lines around her eyes I hadn't seen before. 13-year-old female, she said. Name's Lily. Last seen near the north drainage of the triangle. Her friends reported she walked toward the tree line after they heard what they thought was someone crying. Then she was just gone. Tracks. I asked, start then stop, she said, like someone picked her up, or she stepped off into nothing. And yes, we found rock piles. Quartz. My jaw clenched. How long? 2 hours, she said. Weather's tanking fast. If she's near a tunnel. The unspoken part hung there. It doesn't take long. What's different this time? I asked, you wouldn't have called me if this was just another contain and obfuscate. She handed me the tablet. The thermal image showed the usual. Cold trees, a few warm spots where searchers were moving. Then she zoomed in on a patch of darkness. At first glance, it was just that, lack of heat, a patch of very cold ground. But when she scrubbed back and forth in time, something inside the cold moved. Not a figure. More like the impression of something shifting, displacing heat in a way nothing living should. Infrasound sensors went nuts here, she said. Pattern almost identical to what you recorded by accident on your first trip into C7. And then she tapped to the next frame. A tall, vertical smear of intense heat appeared at the edge of the cold patch. For a moment it overlapped, like someone stepping between a kid and traffic. Walker, I said. Yeah, she said. He's back on camera. He's hovering near this zone, and every time the infrasound spikes from down there, we get a counter spike from his location. You know what that looks like to my boss. A resource, I said. A jammer, she said. Something we might be able to amplify. But right now, it's one scared kid out there, not a test scenario. Good, I said. Let's go. Reyes put a hand on my shoulder as I turned. You don't owe us this, he said quietly. I owe it to the numbers, I said. We're past due for one in the win column. Lily, we went in light. Me, Morales, one of Collins's quiet techs with a pack full of sensors instead of extra water. The forest did its usual trick. Normal at the edge, more muted as we went deeper. Then the sound fell off a cliff like someone throwing a blanket over the world. I felt the shift in my feelings before I heard the first knock. Knock! Off to our right. Yeah, I hear you, I muttered. We followed the GPS to the last known point. The snow was thin here, a dusting over damp duff, enough to see that a pair of small boots had walked to the tree line, then stopped. Then nothing. Lily, I called. This is search and rescue. Call out if you can hear me. For a second, nothing. Then, faint and wrong, from deeper in the trees. Over here, kid's voice. Thin, warbly around the edges, like it was being played through a broken speaker. Morales eyed me. That's not right. No, I agreed. It's not. Another voice joined it. Different tone, same distortion. Help me. I'm stuck. That's how it gets you. Not with claws. With familiarity. Lily, I shouted again, sharper. If you can hear me, I want you to think about your favorite song. Do not move. Do not follow voices. Just think about the song. Morales gave me a look like I'd grown another head. Long story. I said, if she can lock onto something that's hers, it's one less hook that thing can get in. The air thickened. The frequency I remember from the cave started to build. A pressure behind the eyes, a sense that the trees were subtly bending in directions they shouldn't. The tech swore under his breath. Sensors are pegging. It's like standing next to a subwoofer from hell. Get what you can, I said, then be ready to kill that pack and run. Knock, knock. Closer this time. We eased forward. The cold patch on Collins's thermal turned out to be a shallow hollow in the ground. Half-buried rock, deadfall, a tangle of roots. It looked like nothing. That was worse than a big, obvious cave mouth. At least those you could see. Another not voice wafted out of nowhere. I'm down here. It came from everywhere and nowhere. Under our feet, over our heads. My vision blurred for a second. Trunk lines warping. Then, through the warping, I saw her. Lily, 13 maybe, bright blue jacket, one mitten missing. She was standing at the edge of the hollow, toes a half step from nothing. The ground in front of her shimmered slightly, darker than the rest. Not a hole, not physically, more like thinness. She stared down at it, eyes unfocused, lips moving silently. If she heard us, she didn't react. Lily, I barked. Do not step forward. I want you to listen only to me. You understand? Her head turned a fraction. Not quite enough. Behind us, a branch creaked. The tech hissed. Morales swore. I didn't look. I knew what it was. The air shifted like something massive had displaced it. A shadow fell across us, not blocking light. Exactly, but muting it. The knocking started again, but this time it wasn't on wood. It was inside my chest. Thump, thump, thump. My rib cage vibrated. The frequency from underground stuttered, like a bad connection. The trees stopped bending quite so much. Come on, big guy, I muttered. Do your thing. The pressure built. Two opposing waves. Underground. Static with intent. Try and pull small minds toward it like gravity. Above ground. Raw. Brute signal. Pounding through bone and bark. The tech held up his tablet with shaking hands. The graph was a mess of spikes, but there was a pattern. One wave pushing back the other, crest for crest. Jesus, he breathed. He's jamming it. He's actually jamming it. One more pulse. Stronger than the rest. It felt like being punched in the lungs by a sound. The air in front of Lily seemed to tear. Not visually. There was no Hollywood crack in reality. But the feeling of thinness snapped, all at once. The low vibration from below cut out. Lily blinked. Her knees buckled. She pitched forward and hit solid ground, arms out. She rolled, scraped, started to cry like a normal, terrified kid who just realized she nearly died. I was on her in 3 strides, dropping to my knees. My hands found her shoulders, solid and shaking. "Hey!" I said, sharper than I meant to. "Hey, look at me." She did. Her pupils were blown, but they focused. Tears cut clean lines down her cheeks. "Where's my music?" she sobbed. My throat tightened. "In your head," I said, "exactly where it needs to be. You did good." Morales was scanning the tree line, eyes wide. The text tablet was still screaming data. I felt him before I saw him. Walker stepped closer to the edge of the clearing, half hidden behind a pair of firs. Enough that I could see him. Not enough that Lily would, unless she turned at exactly the right angle. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the hollow. If hate has a physical temperature, it was in that stare. The ground gave a tiny, petulant throb. One last attempt from below, like fingers losing their grip on a ledge. Walker answered with a knock that sounded like a battering ram on my bones. Then, for the first time since I'd known he existed, he did something loud enough to be unmistakable. He roared, not an animal bellow, not a Hollywood monster scream. A deep, layered sound that hit 3 pitches at once, ripping through the clearing. Birds exploded from the trees in a panic. Snow sifted from branches. My vision shook. The vibration from underground dropped to nothing. For a long second, everything was still. Then the forest came back. Sound rushed in like water, wind, branches, distant birds complaining. The tech was staring at his tablet, like it had grown wings. The spike, Jesus, it canceled the whole stack. If we can map that frequency, we could. Later, I snapped. Lily clung to Morales, sobbing into his jacket. I stood slowly and looked toward the trees. Walker was still there. We looked at each other. No cave this time. No bones between us. Just a kid breathing, alive, and a patch of ground that suddenly looked a lot more ordinary. I lifted my hand. Not a wave, just a flat palm over my chest. "Thank you." He watched the gesture, head cocked slightly. Then, very slowly, with those massive fingers, he did the same. Thump. Then he turned and was gone, moving through the trees with that impossible, silent speed. Sealing the wound. There was no way in hell Collins was going to leave that hollow alone afterwards. 2 weeks later, I got an invite, not an order, to sit in on a geological hazard mitigation planning session, which is bureaucrat for we're going to make the mountain fall on its own wound and pretend it was an accident. They'd pulled in a seismic engineer, a geologist, and 2 people whose badges they never took out of their pockets. The plan was simple enough in principle. Controlled microcharges placed in specific fault lines to trigger natural sloughing of unstable rock above known tunnel sites. Localized, minimal footprint. The engineer said, to anyone looking at the after action, it's just a small landslide. Unfortunate but natural. You start blowing charges up there, you'll spook everything, including him. I said, that's why we start small, slow, and targeted, Collins replied. And we monitor infrasound before, during, after. If whatever's under there pushes back, we abort. And if Walker pushes back, she gave me a level look. Then we take our hands off his fence and go back to rattling it from a distance. It took a month of prep. Permits. Fake logging operations to justify heavy equipment near the closed zones. Trail rehabilitation. That just happened to put people exactly where they needed to plant charges and sensors. When the day came, it was almost anticlimactic. I watched from a lookout with Reyes and McCready. A pair of binoculars pressing my face. 3 dull thumps rolled beneath our feet. Not enough to rattle windows, just enough to make dust drift from the rafters. Down in C7, 2 distant slopes sagged. Trees leaned, then went down in slow motion. Rock and earth sloughed, settling into a new, slightly different shape. To anyone else, it was just erosion. To us, it was sutures. Seismic readings? Collins's voice crackled over the radio from her command post. Stable, came the reply. No underground spikes. Infrasound baseline is quiet. Quieter than we've ever seen it. And our friend, she asked. Thermals show 3-4 large heat signatures in the canopy near the operations zone, the tech said. They stayed at distance. No approach. No counterspikes. If anything, the interference dropped. It's like they were waiting to see if we were going to screw it up. McCready spat into his cup. Took us a couple thousand years, but we finally figured out how to help instead of just tripping over ourselves. I lowered the binoculars. For the first time since I crawled out of that cave, the ache between my shoulder blades eased. We didn't close every tunnel. We didn't solve the whole problem. The mountain is old and big and full of holes. Some you don't find until they swallow someone. But that day, we sealed the worst of it. We made it harder for the thing underneath to reach up and pull. And we didn't have to kill the thing on top to do it. A different kind of myth. Years passed. Clearwater still had accidents. Broken legs, hypothermia, the occasional dumbass selfie incident. That's the cost of wilderness. But the pattern broke. The triangle's numbers flattened. No more clusters of disappearances with no trace. Now, when someone went missing up there, we found them. Sometimes they were confused. Sometimes they had gaps of 30 minutes they couldn't account for. Once in a while, they reported dreams of tall shapes in the trees or a loud heartbeat in my head. But they came home. The database, the one they made sure I couldn't access anymore, started to look less like a graveyard and more like what it should have been all along. A record of hard places and hard rescues, not a ledger of people swallowed by something that shouldn't exist. Tourists still bought T-shirts with cartoon Bigfoots on them at the gift shop. Kids still posed next to plywood cutouts with their faces where the mouth should be. On some level, I'm fine with that. Myths are armor. Sometimes they hide the thing that will eat you. Sometimes they hide the thing that stands between you and the thing that will eat you. If the world wants to keep laughing at Bigfoot, good. It gives him room to work. The last knock, I stayed out of the job after that. Really stayed out. I consulted once in a while. Quiet calls from Collins or Reyes when a pattern looked too close for comfort. I'd look at the data, nod, tell him my gut said just a lost hiker, or watch C7 closely this week. But I didn't go back in. Not deep until last summer. I was camping at the periphery of the park, off duty, anonymous. No uniform, no badge. Just me, a tent, and a stubborn desire to remember that I liked trees before they turned into case files. The night was clear. Crickets going. A barred owl doing its idiot who cooks for you bit down in the draw. I was half asleep when I heard it. Knock. Soft. Distant. Not the big, gut-punching kind. A small one. Testing. I sat up slowly, heart rate picking up. The second knock was closer. Still gentle, like somebody tapping politely on the world. I stepped out of the tent. The trees were just silhouettes against the stars. The air had that cool, dry feel it gets at 3 a.m. Yeah, I said quietly. I hear you. Nothing answered. Then, from maybe 30 yards away, at chest height on a sapling, I heard a rustle. Something shifted. Eyes reflected faintly between branches. Smaller. Shorter. Not 8 feet. Maybe 6. The shape froze when it saw me. I stayed very still, not reaching for anything, not moving closer. Easy, I murmured. Just passing through, same as you. The outline shifted its weight from one foot to the other, the way kids do when they're not sure if they're in trouble. Behind it, higher, deep in the dark, something bigger moved. I didn't see him fully. Just a bulk, a hint of outline. The smaller one glanced back, like a kid looking at a parent. There was no sound I could hear, but something passed between them. The youngster turned back to me. For half a heartbeat, the forest and the job and the numbers dropped away. It was just one tired man and a juvenile legend looking at each other across a small, shared piece of ground. Then the smaller one did something that made my throat tighten. It lifted a hand, clumsy with the weight of it, and tapped its own chest. Once. The gesture was rough, unpracticed. I'd seen a cleaner version before in a cave, surrounded by bones. I almost laughed. Instead, I just nodded and did the same. Thump, Yeah, I said. I know you're here. A soft huff, a shifting of branches. Then they were gone. Both of them. One large, one not as large yet. The crickets kept chirping. The owl kept asking who cooked for who. The night went on. You wanted a happy ending. Here it is, as honest as I can give it. The thing under the mountain is still there. It probably always will be. We closed some doors. That's all you ever really do with the big stuff. Buy time, knock some teeth out, keep the numbers from getting worse. But the part that keeps me from waking up screaming every night isn't that we hurt the dark. It's that we learn we're not the only one standing against it. Somewhere in a stretch of forest you'll only ever know from postcards, there's a line of giants whose entire existence is wrapped around keeping those doors shut. They bleed. They age. They grieve their dead the same way we do, in places under roots where we'll never find the bones. We called them monsters. We blamed them for every hiker who never came home. We were wrong. Next time you're out there and you hear 3 sharp knocks echo through the trees, space just so, don't roll your eyes and call it Bigfoot jokes. Don't go toward it, either. That's still stupid. Just know this. Something old heard something worse waking up below your feet, and it answered, as long as that knocking's still out there, somewhere under the wind and the birds and the stupid tourists yelling at each other over Bluetooth speakers, the line still holding. For now, that's as close to a happy ending as wilderness ever gives you, and for once it's enough.